Every couple of Mondays, we'll get a visit from Connor O'Gara, the senior national columnist at Saturday Down South, covering college football and this time of the year, of course, college basketball as well. Connor, how you doing? Happy March.
Happy March, gentlemen. Yeah, life is good. We're diving into all things SEC tournament this week. It does feel like a very unique set of circumstances that the SEC is going to be the eye of the nation in college basketball. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, and we have the same conversation that we would have had going into the football playoff. How many teams getting in? How many teams getting in? Well, the SEC is in a different position in basketball than they were in football, where they're going to have the most teams in this tournament.
And it's kind of crazy to think that it feels like a lock that they're going to break the Big East record of 11 teams in. They did that in 2011. It's at this point, it looks like, is it going to be 12 or is it going to be 13? Because I think that if you've been following all the bracketology and Joe Lunardi and various projections and all of that, it still feels like the SEC is going to get the benefit of the doubt. Just all the different quad one opportunities that have been created, it just kind of makes you think going in, like, man, it's going to be really difficult for even a team like Oklahoma that's sitting there with 12 conference losses to be left out of this field. Now, whether or not that's going to hold true 2 weeks from now with the SEC being the best conference in college basketball, it's that argument. That kind of remains to be seen, but it does kind of set up for a fascinating week. And, who knows if it's going to be considered a real legitimate, hey, this is a head-turning accomplishment to win this conference title, when we know it doesn't necessarily determine your NCAA tournament fate. And we've seen in the past that the SEC has not gotten the benefit of the doubt for its champion winning this tournament. So I do think this year feels different in a lot of different ways, both for the teams that are on the bubble and the teams that are trying to lock in a one seed.
Connor, who do you think the best team in the country is right now? Is it Michigan State? Is it St. John's? Is it Duke? You just saw Auburn lose at home, but right now, who would you have as the best team in the country?
I'd still take Auburn. And I think context is important. I understand they fell to 3 in the AP poll, and there are people that might want to look a little bit too far into how it played out. Losing to Alabama on senior night, I think that there are different ways to interpret this end-of-season stretch where they already had the SEC tournament clinched going into these last 2 games. And for a team that last year saw what happened in the NCAA tournament, even after it went through the SEC tournament and won it, I do kind of question a little bit of that motivation. That's not to say they didn't want to win those games or anything like that. I still think I would take their chances of winning any game, anytime, anywhere. And when you win 16 quad one games, how can you not trust Auburn at this point? And the big question is going to be, can they pull off what Virginia did in 2019? Now, different because obviously Auburn wasn't a 1 seed when it fell to Yale, but there was a whole lot of people saying Auburn could win a national title last year. And can you pull that feat off year to year of going from the team that got embarrassed in round 1 to potentially going all the way? That's how we're going to define this Auburn season, with how battle-tested they've been. So I would still take them over Duke. I know Florida's playing extremely well right now. They deserve to be in that conversation. Maybe they already have a 1 seed all but locked up, but I just tend to think that their good is better than anybody else's good.
What's your feeling on how on Arkansas and really how they're playing their best basketball right now with wins in 4 of the last 5, and man, they've had to remake themselves twice in the last 5 weeks. It's just, this has been, I think, a great coaching job by Cal. And it's not to say that hasn't been noticed. I think people have noticed it. It's just, it's not getting the same kind of pub as Pitino or Izzo because he hasn't won the league. But that has nothing to do with the fact that I think he's done a great job this year with a team that's been beat up and had to remake themselves.
Yeah, I mean, did a pretty solid job, all things considered. Now, I won't go full Seth Greenberg and say that this is absolutely one of his best coaching jobs or go that far, because I think you could go back to Kentucky and find other teams that had no returning starters whatsoever, and by the end of the season, the question was, will they win a national championship? Now, this is a different set of circumstances because obviously you inherited a program that you had to basically start over from, and you had to recruit your own roster, and he's been able to do that. If they are able to win multiple games in the SEC tournament, keep in mind that Cal has not won multiple games in the SEC tournament since 2018. That's a crazy thought, considering how much he dominated that tournament in the 2010s. But if they're able to do that, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, they're 9-5. They've gone 9-5 really since the calendar turned to February. Going into the NCAA tournament, you'd be wondering, hey, is this kind of more like vintage Cal than 2020's Cal, which has been a total disappointment once it gets to the postseason. Kentucky only has one SEC tournament victory in the 2020s. Can they overcome that? I think if they're able to do that, and if they're able to win 2 games, obviously they would have to beat an Ole Miss team that's a bit of a wild card with how well coached they are with Chris Beard. But if they're able to do that, all of a sudden people are going to be looking at Arkansas in a much different way. And they'll be saying, wow, is this a team that nobody would want to face with an opening weekend matchup?
Hey, Connor, a little college football. I want to ask you about your thoughts. That now, when Eddie George was interviewed by the Chicago Bears a couple months ago, I kind of thought, I was like, I didn't see that was going to be a real thing. But Eddie George taking the Bowling Green job after 4 years at Tennessee State. Is he a coach that you could see in a big-time Power 5, as a SEC or a Big Ten school in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
I definitely think there's that possibility, and let's call it what it is. I think Deion Sanders fast-tracking this plan has made athletic directors open up their minds to that possibility of former player that doesn't necessarily have this 20, 25-year run as a head coach, of giving them that opportunity and knowing that in this day and age you can build around them with general manager-type pieces, a big support staff, in the right type of alignment, can be a huge game changer. And I think that for someone like Eddie George to be able to get this job and to leave an HBCU, I think is a different type of thing that we're seeing now, and one that could become more of a trend after what Deion did at Jackson State, and then to go to Colorado. There are a lot of people saying he's not going to win there. That's arguably the worst power conference program of the last 15 years. How in the world is that going to work? And in year 2, he gets into an AP top 25 finish. So Eddie George is trying to follow on that sort of path. Now he's doing so with a different step in between. Bowling Green is obviously a different set of circumstances than Colorado, so I won't pretend like that's the exact same thing. But there will be a lot of people watching that. And can that be a model that's replicated? We're seeing former players get hired for jobs in college football, even though they don't necessarily have this great background, and I do think that could become more of a trend in the latter half of the 2020s.
Hogs start spring practice today, Connor. They've remade the offense to the point where 6 new offensive linemen, there's 5 new receivers, 3 tight ends, and a running back that all came out of the portal. Sam said last week that he expects he'll go after players defensively once the spring portal opens, so you can obviously tell. It's like I already can sort of script out what we'll hear from some of the reporters who will be at practice, because they are opening practice. It'll be, well, the offense dominated, and I think part of that has to do with they don't feel as good about their defense as they do about their offense at all.
No, and I don't necessarily blame them. Look, that's kind of the way that this is going to work now post spring. You want to get an edge rusher in the post-spring window that becomes available, and maybe you overpay for him a little bit, so be it. You're a team that's in desperate need of help. And I think Sam Pittman knows as well as anyone, hey, 6-6, probably not exactly going to quiet the hot seat talk. That's just not going to be the case. And so, I do think that that'll be a significant push. He's been pretty transparent with their areas of need in the past and how they feel like they need to address them. Everybody at this time last year was talking about how much he was going to be more hands-on with the offensive line, how he was truly going to turn over the offense to Bobby Petrino and just see if this thing can go. And at times last year, it definitely did. But you're exactly right. That's how this is going to play out. Taylor Green should be in really favorable spots in this spring, this spring camp, even though he does have a new set of surroundings with all those different weapons to work with and new offensive line, this and that. But, yeah, you would hope that your returning starting quarterback is going to look like someone that is experienced in this system, and that's exactly what Taylor Green should be.
Hey, Connor, with the, Sampson from Tennessee left, Rocket Sanders, who was an All-American a couple years ago. I mean, you know him in Arkansas, was at South Carolina. He's gone as well. Is there, give me the top 3 running backs in the SEC. Is there somebody out there that's as good as like a Leonard Fournette or a Derrick Henry or years past a Todd Gurley? Who are the top 3 running backs that are coming back in the SEC?
Those guys are gone, man. Like, it's weird because I had this conversation around June, I think it was, of, guys, who's going to lead the SEC in rushing? There's only 2 of the top 10 leading rushers from the SEC coming back, and I ended up settling on C.J. Baxter, the Texas running back, who then goes down with a season-ending injury in fall camp, and I had to pivot from there, and it ends up being Dylan Sampson, who was awesome, but he's one and done, and he's now one and done as a starter and now off to the NFL. But it does feel like we're going to be asking that question a lot, and I feel like the Texas backfield is a great place to start. I think you could have 2 of the top 5 backs in the SEC in that backfield, depending on if the guy I just mentioned, C.J. Baxter, makes a full return. Trey Wisner was the guy that they really trusted down the stretch. But I think that there are going to be a couple of young backs that emerge. I think someone like a Jaden Baugh from Florida is really intriguing, especially when you pair it with DJ Lagway, the things he's already done in that passing game. And then Le'Veon Moss, he's going to be the question mark because he goes down with a season-ending knee injury on just an awkward hit against South Carolina. And the Texas A&M backfield did not necessarily have the depth it needed down the stretch. But if he comes back in that offense that's being run by Colin Klein and looks like himself from the jump, he could easily lead the SEC in rushing. He could be that 1,500-yard rusher. But there is just not that guy who is profiling like a Leonard Fournette. Nate Frazier is one that everybody's going to be excited about at Georgia. But he's not one of these guys coming back like he's Todd Gurley or something like that. In the SEC, yet another year where it feels like it just truly lacks those returning stars in the backfield.
I think it's interesting that spring practice is starting now within the shadow of a month before the House settlement is hopefully approved, and therefore the structure of college sports will begin from there. But the sport that has already planned for this settlement being approved is football, because these rosters that you're dealing with right now, these are guys that have negotiated salaries to be paid directly from the schools. Now, if this is not approved, Connor, I can't even imagine what college football goes through.
I don't know either, because I feel like the byproduct of that could be awkward cuts and guys hitting the portal that you're like, wait a minute, what? I thought this guy was going to be coming through the ranks, and maybe he's a former 5-star entering year 2, and a team just says, you know what, we can't really make that work. And there are going to be, I think, a lot of these awkward conversations. I'm waiting to see how public some of this stuff gets with what's settled on, and if we have a true feel for how a roster construction looks, and not just, what this guy's agent reported and what that guy's agent reported. But I do think that you're right. Football is the only one that can truly prepare for this, and it's the only one that really has to kind of factor that in. I mean, baseball, splitting up, 9.5 scholarships at certain places, you've had to try and figure out a variation of this at different points. Football is the sport that has been like, hey, scholarship here, scholarship there, we're good. And now that it's being broken down this sort of way, it does feel like we're entering a very new era with how rosters are going to be managed. All the more reason why, if you don't have a general manager right now in this day and age as a power conference college football program, get on the phone and get one, because your head coach is going to have his head spinning with all of this house settlement stuff that's going to come to the forefront here in the next few weeks.
Well, Arkansas does not yet have a general manager. Sam's talked about this. They may be looking. I think he said he wants somebody that has done this before, been an assistant in the NFL. But, I mean, if you're talking about a team that does not have one that is Power 4, Arkansas is one of them. And we're assuming something happens during spring practice, but that's just an assumption.
Yeah, look, get on the phone and find that guy. They're able to get Jim Nagy with the Senior Bowl. Oklahoma was just able to bring him on board, and that's something that I think a lot of people looked at and went, man, if even a team like Oklahoma that actually has recruiting figured out pretty well, and that's been something that Brent Venables has been praised for, if even they are going to those lengths, that should probably send off some alarms to college football programs across the country like Arkansas that have that position not even vacant, but just not filled, not occupied by anyone, not even created just yet.
BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here.